All right, welcome everybody. My name is Jackie Otero and I'm the program director for the Entertainment and Music Business Bachelor of Science degree programs here at Full Sail University. I've been here for almost 13 years. And I just want to give a quick disclaimer before we get started. I do have 2 elementary age children with me at home, so they know that they're supposed to stay on that side of the house, but you never know when we might get a fun interruption. So that's part of the fun of working remotely. So I am going to present to you guys today the art of the pitch, and I wanted to share a little bit about my background in this area. So why me? That's always the first question that we ask when we're asked to do a presentation, right? So why me? I used to teach in the music business degree program. I used to teach the capstone course, which was an entrepreneurial pitch class. So I was constantly coaching students on their pitching and on their business ideas. And one day I just got an email from an organization called Collegiate DECA, and I wasn't really aware of them, but they asked me to judge one of their business competitions. And so I did, because why not have a new experience? And I got to judge different business school students, college students from around the state. And the competitive spirit in me kind of came out. And I said, you know what, we should be here. Full Sail should have a competitive team because I think we would do really well here. So about 7 years ago, I started our own Collegiate DECA chapter at Full Sail, and it's a business competition club. So we compete against other business schools around the state of Florida in areas like entrepreneurship, management, marketing, event planning, and then hopefully every year we go to the international competition as well. So this photo on the screen that you see here is from 2016. This was our 3rd year having a chapter, and we won the international championship for the sports and entertainment marketing category. So this was like one of my proud competition moments as a teacher and as a mentor. So I'm the Collegiate DECA advisor at Full Sail. I'm also, I just participated my 3rd time in being a judge for the NABO Propel Her Pitch competition. NABO is the National Association of Women Business Owners. It's a great organization if you're not familiar with it. It is nationwide, but our Florida chapter does a pitch competition every year, and they give away lots of funding and all kinds of prizes to the winners, and it's for both emerging and established businesses. We also have a Full Sail pitch competition that we hold every year, and we give out scholarships. And I'm also a music business consultant still. So in addition to everything that I do in education, I do still work with clients on the side. I used to have my own business doing artist management and music licensing. So I used to constantly be pitching my artists for opportunities. I don't do that so much anymore, but now I'm more on the coaching end of coaching and mentoring other people to pitch. And I'm glad that it sounds like a few of my students are joining today too. So hi, everybody. So first of all, I wanted to address the difference between a pitch and a presentation, because a lot of times they're used synonymously, but they are slightly different. So a presentation can be about anything. My son just gave a presentation to his 3rd grade class about seahorses. Right, so he wasn't trying to convince them to do anything with that information. It was just simply an exercise in him doing a bit of public speaking and presenting information. So typically a presentation has some kind of visual element. It could be students in school, it could be colleagues making presentations to each other, you know, meetings at work, that sort of thing. They can be quick or elaborate. A pitch is a little bit different just because the purpose is a bit different and it's a bit more focused. It's really about trying to convince somebody to take some kind of action. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a formal presentation. It could just be in a conversation or a phone call or an email. There's lots of different ways to deliver pitches. Sometimes you use a presentation. You can certainly have a visual element to your pitch, but it's not always necessary. So you can pitch to anybody at any time. And at the end of this session, I'm going to go through kind of different types of pitches and different tips that I have for each kind, because it is a little bit different when you're pitching in person versus via email or LinkedIn or virtually. So most of the presentation applies to in-person pitching, but you can certainly use a lot of these tips in other ways too. So I want you to be thinking along the way, ask yourself, what do you think makes a successful pitch? Because I'm always adding to my list. So I did come up with 15 tips today that I want to share with you all, but I would be open to adding anything. If you guys have more to share, if you have commentary along the way, please share that in the chat box. I can't necessarily see it while I'm presenting my slides too, but Joel's here to help me kind of keep an eye on the chat and would love to open it up at the end for your questions. But if you have questions along the way too, or you want to throw in something, feel free to do that and Joel can help facilitate. So thank you for that. Okay, so here are my 15 tips for a successful pitch. And I put these in a downloadable document so that you don't have to necessarily take notes. You don't have to remember all these. You can go to the link that's on the screen. It's bit.ly/15 pitch tips. And you'll see a summary sheet of the 15 tips that I'm about to present to you. All right, so here we go. Tip number 1, open with a hook. I always instruct my students, you gotta get the audience's attention right from the beginning. It could be a question. It could be, so how many of you have seen a concert in the last month? Well, I guess that's a bad one right now. But it could be, it could be a question. It could be one of those where you see, okay, close your eyes and imagine that this is happening, right? It could be, raise your hand if you've ever experienced this. So some way that's interactive is always a good hook. Just something that kind of wakes them up and, keeps them engaged. So be deliberate in thinking of how are you introducing yourself and how are you hooking your audience before you really get into kind of the meat and potatoes of your presentation. All right, tip 2, you want to always be, and you can use this in your hook, you want to figure out how you are delivering a solution to someone's problem, okay? If you are pitching something and it's let's say it's a business idea, and you cannot identify the problem that you're solving or who you're solving it for, you may want to go back to the drawing board about what it is that you're pitching and what your business idea is actually doing for somebody else. I had a lot of students kind of back in the day who would be like, well, I want to have a recording studio, or I want to have an artist management company. And I say, well, what's the problem that you're solving with this business? And they're like, well, I just want to have it. This is my career. So it's not enough to have an idea that you want to do. You have to figure out, what does your audience want? What does your potential client want? How can you deliver something that is a need for somebody else? And I would suggest that you don't pitch anything until you know the answer to that. So one of the exercises that I like to do with my students is to look at points of pain. This is a quick, useful exercise in identifying problems and potential solutions. So what is the point of pain that you're experiencing? It could be in your specific industry. So in my case, if you're in the music industry, and you're trying to promote an artist, what would be a point of pain? What's an inefficiency that exists? What is something that's a problem that we could try to solve? It could be just an annoyance that you have. So the way I like to approach this with my students is, let's pick an everyday object that is annoying to you or inefficient, something that we could do a better job with. So the example that I thought of today was laundry. I don't know, I'm stuck in my house, got a lot of laundry to do. So when I think of an annoyance or an inefficiency I have with my laundry, I have these 2 big state-of-the-art appliances, but every single time I've got to dive into one when it's done washing and then put it all into the other one. And it's not like my most favorite thing to do. And sometimes I forget about it and it just sits there, right? So I think, technology is probably at a state where we could combine this into one machine already, don't you think? So to me, that's an inefficiency. That's an opportunity that maybe we could pitch to Samsung or one of the appliance makers to say, how can we make this more efficient for people? How can we solve a problem? How can we combine washing and drying of clothes into one product or service? So it's a good exercise to do. I do that sometimes with, we've done it with toothbrushes. What are the inefficiencies of toothbrushes? Well, let's think of a problem to solve and think of a solution. It's a good way to practice your pitching technique too, is to identify problems and present solutions. All right, tip number 3, know your role. This is my favorite kind of role, but not the kind I'm talking about now. This is vital in our DECA competitions because they are primarily role play scenarios. So they're actually given a case study in their selected category and they're given a problem. They're told, this is your role that you're playing. So maybe you are the marketing coordinator for this company. And here's a problem that you're going to have to solve. They have to come up with solutions and then pitch it back to, the VP of marketing at the end of 1 hour, for example. So you have to know who you are in this scenario and how you relate to your audience, okay? So why are you the right person to deliver this? What makes you the expert that they can trust? We often buy into the person that is pitching something even more than the idea itself. Like if you believe in the person and they instill confidence, oftentimes you're sort of like, well, the idea needs some work, but I believe in you and I want to invest in you as the entrepreneur or as whoever the person is that's pitching. So really be confident in your role and what you bring to the table. Number 4, and this goes right along with it, is you also need to really understand your audience. So not just in a general sense, be as specific as you can be. Are you pitching to the final decision makers? Is it a board of directors? Are they stakeholders in some way? What is their buy-in? What do they care about? How can you connect with them emotionally to get them to buy into whatever the idea is that you're pitching? Are they judges? So, I mean, I've been involved in a lot of pitch competitions. So when you're a judge, you're kind of grading them based on a scorecard. You know, if you're a teacher and you're working with students, you're grading them based on a rubric. So you want to know, what does your audience care about? Do they care about what's on that scorecard? Do they care about their return on investment? You know, are they more financial focused? Really know kind of how to tap into those desires that they have. Also, a good exercise to do is to try to anticipate what questions they are going to ask you. So kind of identifying who they are, where they're coming from, what they care about will help you come up with sample questions, because you're not going to answer every question in any kind of pitch. I think the best pitch leaves room for conversation afterwards. So try to anticipate what kinds of questions you might get. All right, tip number 5, rolling right along. Choose your tone carefully and wisely. So your tone of your pitch is conveyed in a lot of different ways. It's not just your voice, and it's not just your content. It's also your visuals. It's also your attire and how you're dressed, right? So I was, the pitch competition that I did for NABO this year, one of the pitches that was excellent was, it was from a breast cancer survivor, and she was pitching a new robe that was specifically customized for breast cancer patients. And she shared a really personal anecdote about how this applied to her and how she was solving that kind of point of pain that she had identified. So this wasn't like a super snappy and, you know, smiley presentation. It was a little bit more somber in tone. It was a little bit more serious. And that was very appropriate for her. And it emotionally connected with us, not in a happy way, but in a way that we really wanted to help people that were in this situation. Right? So think about, what is the tone that's most appropriate for your audience and for your content. If you're pitching a really creative idea, it's probably okay to be a little bit more informal and have more fun with it. So really think about that before you go into the room. And I'll talk a little bit more about attire in just a little bit, because I think attire, your dress, I think also plays into the tone that you're bringing in. Tip number 6, know your time limit. Know what you're working with ahead of time and stick to it. This is something that we have students practice all the time. So at the DECA competitions, everything is timed. So you have a very limited amount of time to present and to take questions. In most of our classes, we have time limits on our presentations so that you know, okay, you have 5 minutes max to present this, and we're going to cut you off after that. And we do that because we want people to be respectful of the audience's time, no matter where they're pitching. So if somebody tells you, sure, I've got 5 minutes for you to pitch your idea, it shows a sign of respect if you stick to that 5 minutes and you are very respectful of their time. A lot of people will keep talking as long as you let them. So I think it's very important to know exactly what time frame you're working within and to stick to that. Tip 7, deliver your message clearly. So explain your idea in simple terms and get to the point as pretty much as soon as you can. If I don't know what you're pitching me in the first minute, you've already lost me. You really need to be clear and upfront with exactly what your idea is. Explain it in simple terms. Use real life case studies when you can. Use evidence, use research. It really is a way to build your credibility of your message. If you know your subject matter inside and out, backwards and forwards, it's going to instill confidence in your audience that you know what you're talking about. So I like this mantra. I took this from, anybody remember the Fat Boys? They were a hip hop trio from the 80s that made beatboxing very infamous on the radio. So the Fat Boys had an album called All Meat, No Filler. So I think this is a good mantra to keep in mind when you are pitching an idea. Keep it all meat, no filler. We don't need a lot of extraneous information, okay? If you're throwing in facts and figures that don't really tie into anything, scrap them. You know, be an editor. And sometimes it's hard to edit ourselves down. So I think it's really good to practice it in front of somebody else who can kind of tell you, okay, I think you can cut that part. That part went a little bit long, right? So keep that in mind, all meat, no filler. I have one other way that I like to describe it, so maybe you can relate to this one more. I also have a no fluff policy with my students, okay? So that means you get to the point, you tell me what the idea is, you tell me the important details, and you call me to action, and you leave it at that. I don't need a lot of extra information, extra stories, right? So no fluff. And those are two things to keep in mind when you're kind of developing your content. Okay, tip 8, use a storytelling structure. So here's an example of a 5-act storytelling structure. You can also do a 3-act. I'll give you a couple of examples of this. But have a beginning, a middle, and an end to your pitch. Make it memorable. Don't just throw us a bunch of information and then end it abruptly. This is a lot of what I coach my students on, because a lot of times their ideas and their content is wonderful, but they don't really have a story, and we kind of get lost in all of the information. So here's one example of how you could build this. So Act 1, you could consider that to be your introduction, your hook, and your elevator pitch, which is just like 1 to 2 sentences, getting straight to the point of what it is. Act 2 could be where you're giving us more information about the problem that you're solving, the need in the industry that you found, and research. Again, this is a place to kind of build up your credibility, back up what you're saying with some claims that have research, that have facts behind them. Act 3, which we could consider the climax, this should be where you're really presenting the meat of your idea. Give us your solution, give us the benefits that your product or service offers, and give us all those special features. Really have us buying into what is this idea and why should we love it and why should we buy into it. Act 4, this is where you can get into more details if you have time, okay? So details like your marketing strategies, your financial projections, your timelines for launch. There's a lot of other information you can get into here, legal and ethical considerations, that sort of thing. So that really depends on how much time you have to pitch. And then Act 5 is your wrap up, right? That's your resolution. You want to summarize what you've pitched and have some kind of ask or call to action at the end. What are you asking them for? Why are you in this room pitching to them? Is it because you're trying to sell something? Are you trying to get them to agree to pass it along to, through the gatekeeper along to the decision maker? What do you want them to do next? Here's another analogy that I use with students a lot is think of it as bookends, all right? If you have the books in the middle, that's all your information. That's all of your content. But it's not just enough to throw us the content. Have bookends on either side to give us a nice introduction, a hook, right? Get our attention, and then wrap it up nicely with a summary or conclusion, okay? If you just give us the meat and then you stop abruptly, it's gonna feel like an awkward ending, okay? So think of keeping those bookends in place. Tip number 9, visuals should enhance what you're saying, not distract. Okay, you want to avoid having a ton of information displayed in your visuals if you are using a visual presentation. Try not to have a ton of bullet points and words. One image is usually all you need, and maybe a phrase or a few words. If you keep it simple, the attention will stay on you as the presenter, as the pitcher. In this case, you don't want the attention to be on a slide that's behind you or in front of people on the computer. It's more just like a stopping point, or it's a checkpoint to give some visuals to back up what you're saying, but it shouldn't be where their full attention is. You want the attention to be on you. You should be the one that's engaging enough to hold their attention. So think of your visuals as a supplement, not as, the main attraction. So I have a few examples of some visuals. Think about how you can be a little bit more creative than just using bullet points. So here's an example of bullet points on the left side. I love these bullet points. Who cares what this says? Not interesting. And then on the right side, you can see a little bit more of a visual and creative way to display some information. Also, if you're showing graphs, try to be a little bit more creative with it. So this is a pretty boring standard pie chart graph that you see on the left. And on the right, this is the same information, but I think it's presented just a little bit more creatively. It's showing the ingredients that are in a Snapple. So why not use the Snapple bottle and actually show how it's divvied up? If you are using graphs, okay, a lot of people get very overwhelmed very quickly by graphs, especially if you put something up and it's got lots of bars and lines, and you it takes a bit to orient yourself to what you're supposed to be looking at. So help your audience orient themselves by pointing out what you want them to get from the graph, okay? So use call outs. Like this one, I have a call out for which bars represent Universal films, and that's what we want them to be looking at. So maybe that's showing a point that we're verbally discussing. Okay, so don't just throw up a bunch of information, make sure that it's focused. If there's a valley in the graph and then a peak, maybe you want to highlight those 2 points and give us a little bit of information on what those are connected to. And remember, slides are free, so you don't have to put all your information on one slide. Joel asked me earlier, how many slides do you have? And I'm like, ooh, 43, that sounds like a lot. But guess what, I've got little tidbits on each one. So it's not as if every single one is chock full of information. People digest information better in small tidbits, okay? So just give them a little bit per slide. No need to have a slide full of lots of text and lots of information. Keep it as streamlined as you can. Tip number 10, I just love this dog picture, I'm a fan. Rock your nonverbal communication. So some studies have shown that nonverbal communication is responsible for about 93% of your message, and then verbal communication is the other 7%. So what you're actually doing with your face and your visuals and your body language, it matters a lot more than just your content, okay? So a few things to keep in mind about your nonverbal communication. Make eye contact. Now, right now it's hard. I'm looking at my computer. I'm looking at a little dot on my computer, but I'm pretending that that's you guys and I'm looking at all of you, right? So a little bit harder in a virtual setting, but when you are in person, certainly make it an effort to make eye contact with your audience. You can always tell if somebody's very nervous and they're looking all around at everybody except for you. And it makes you feel, as an audience member, a little bit uneasy or a little bit nervous for them too. And it also just makes you look not very confident if you're not looking somebody right in the eye when you're giving them information. Don't forget to smile too. I have to remind students of this a lot. Sometimes they go up there and they just look like a little bit frozen emotionally, and they're just trying to get their information out and call it a day. And I'm like, if you're not having fun up there and you're not smiling, we're not going to be having fun listening to you. Now, of course, going back to your tone, it's got to be appropriate for the tone of the message that you're delivering. But for the most part, if you're smiling, your audience is smiling, and it's just going to create kind of a more open vibe in the room. So a smile can go a long way. Also, try to limit your fidgeting. You don't want to be like a statue. You don't have to be totally still. But if you're one of those people that talks a lot with your hands, it can be very distracting, right? And that's what we're trying to limit here. We're trying to limit distractions so that you really come across as the expert that is delivering something that audience needs. And if your hands are doing all these different things, they're going to be paying more attention to that than what you're saying. Same thing with your body language and how you're holding yourself. If you're in front of the room and I see a lot of students who sway constantly while they're talking, and you start to focus on that a little bit, or I think it's okay to move. If you have some natural movements, that's okay. If you want to do like a slow walk around the room, depending on how big it is. But one thing that I would suggest doing is, if you're rehearsing this just on your own, use the time-lapse feature on your phone to record yourself. So it kind of speeds it up, and it makes it really obvious what your like nonverbal tics might be. All of a sudden you'll see your hands just like going like this, or you'll see yourself swaying really quickly. So it kind of makes it really obvious what are those nonverbal behaviors that you're displaying. All right, I want to also address attire now, because that is something that we teach. We do teach dress code. When you are doing a presentation or a business pitch, you have to be really aware of how you're presenting yourself. Again, that goes along with the tone of your presentation. It goes along with knowing your audience and what's appropriate. So I want to share with you all a few slides that we use in coaching our students on this. We ask them to, look the part, look like you work at the company that you're pitching to. Think of listing some adjectives that describes that company or describes the business idea, and try to match it with your business attire. So a few different looks we have up here. Efficient, so you're not neglecting any grooming. Be friendly and approachable. You don't want to be too severe. You can be a bit creative if the environment warrants that. Now, our DECA competitions are very formal, and it's very conservative attire. I've had students that were actually deducted points for not men who were deducted points for not having that top button buttoned. Women who lost points because they had open-toed shoes. So they're very, very formal with their business attire. In the creative industries, of course, we are a little bit less formal than that. But that's why it's really good to know who is in that audience and what is appropriate. Disney is one that has a very strong brand with their dress code. So they give their, in their marketing materials, they give examples of what is the Disney look. So if you're going to be presenting or pitching something to Disney, you'd want to be consistent with that Disney look. You want to feel like you match their brand. We also give warnings to students about fashion choices that can go wrong. So avoiding anything that's too revealing, too short, too low, too tight, too see-through, those kinds of things. Anything that's too casual. I know that a lot of times people, especially at Full Sail, I mean, we're a casual environment, we're a very creative environment. We can be a little bit edgy and nobody blinks an eye if you have like purple hair. It's not a big deal. But again, you have to know, who are you pitching to? You want to kind of step it up when you're doing a business pitch. Try to avoid being unkempt or wrinkled, that kind of thing. Be tucked in, be a little bit more maybe conservative than you would be in your casual attire. I will never forget, I interviewed somebody one time who was wearing a blazer and he still had his dry cleaner's tag on his blazer. And I just felt for the guy. I wanted to coach him. I was like, I wanted to say, I'm not gonna hire you, but I wanna coach you. So just kind of being aware of details. And then you also don't want to go the other direction and be too overdone, okay? Sometimes, especially with college students, sometimes you think like getting dressed up is like going to the club. Not the same thing, right? Be aware of perfume and cologne. You got to be real subtle with that kind of thing, because that can be a turnoff to investors or judges, that kind of thing. If you walk into the room, you've got a really strong scent about you. Accessories are something that's commented on a lot at DECA as well. They don't like it when you've got distracting accessories like bracelets that are jangling and making noise and that kind of thing. So it's just good to be considering all these different factors. And then just using your attire as a way to get respect in the workplace. You know, what you choose to wear says a lot about you. That is your brand that you're choosing to display in front of that company. And we always encourage our students to let your personality and your work ethic lead the way, not your appearance. And dress for the position that you want to have, but don't overdo it. Don't go too far on the other side. So if you want to be a concert promoter and you're going in to pitch a show idea to a talent buyer, or you don't want to be in a three-piece suit. It's not going to be, cohesive with the brand. Okay, tip 11, be human. Don't be afraid to throw in a personal anecdote or share a story about yourself. It makes you more relatable as a human being. We teach, as Joel mentioned at the top of the presentation, we have about 10,000 online students at Full Sail. And one thing I say to them right at the top is, we are not robots here grading your papers and giving you, feedback on assignments. We are real people on the other sides of the computer. So I love it when I get to actually see people who I'm not in the same room with. I get to see them on webcam. I get to connect with them. And typically if I have a, virtual presentation or meeting with somebody, I don't want to just jump right into my information. I want to have like a little bit of a human touch to start off with. So remember, another goal of having a pitch is to develop a professional relationship with somebody. So it's also about connecting on a human level. One time I called a producer to pitch some music for an independent film she was working on. And when she picked up the phone and I kind of started giving her my spiel about, what I could offer to help her, she said, you know what, this is not a good time for me to talk. My son just got into a skiing accident and I got to figure out what's happening here. She goes, can you call me back like in a week or two? And I said, of course, no problem. I hope everything's okay. And so I had I have a list of my leads and people I was calling and pitching to. And so I made a note of that on my spreadsheet that, what had happened and what she had said on the phone to me. And when I called her back in 2 weeks, what do you think the first thing I said was? It wasn't all about all these great artists that I have to pitch. It was, how's your son doing? And you could just feel the relief in her voice when she was like, oh, thank you so much for asking. He's doing so much better. Oh, it's been a rough couple of weeks, blah, blah, blah. And it was like she exhaled and then she was like, So what were you calling about again? Let's talk about this. You know, it was like it opened up the gate a little bit for that communication because we were connecting on a human level. I also think, you know, same thing as when you're watching a movie, if you're watching a pitch, you're watching a presentation, if you connect emotionally with the content, it's like you're already sold. So if you can make me cry or laugh or smile, then I feel like you've already won, you know, the majority of the battle. All right, tip number 12, practice. Of course, we want you to practice and rehearse, but don't overdo it. Practice, but don't be perfect. Don't script yourself sentence by sentence, word by word, because then you start to sound like a robot when you're presenting to us. If you have notes in front of you, I highly recommend don't write full sentences in your notes. Just write bullet points. You know, write down your major talking points and practice those. Practice going through those in a conversational tone. So that it feels natural, and it makes you appear more confident when you can be conversational in your tone versus like memorizing something and then regurgitating it to us. I will never forget in Spanish class in, I want to say 11th grade, I had to give a speech in Spanish and I was so petrified. I just wrote out the whole thing. I memorized every single word to the point where I had basically no idea what I was saying. I was just reciting words. Okay, that is the way you don't want to pitch anything. Okay, so keep it informal. Know your content, be confident about it, but don't over practice either. Have confidence in yourself if you know your major talking points that you're going to be ready to perform, you know, when the camera's on or when you're in the room. All right, number 13, bring a takeaway. I love this one when my students present and they have something to give me at the end, something that I can keep or something that I can remember the presentation by. I just think it's a really nice touch. It's another way to convey your tone and your brand. So if you give a flyer or a brochure or a mock-up of your product, I think it's just a great way to kind of solidify the idea in your audience's mind. It could even just be a business card, you know, at the end of the meeting. So for example, today I have the takeaway for you guys. So you can still do it in a virtual environment. I just put together a quick PDF with my 15 tips and my contact information, and I put it into a Google Drive, made a bit.ly out of it, and then shared it with you guys on my slides. And I'll share that again at the end too. So you can't even do digital takeaways. Number 14, I'm just rolling right along here. I'm not paying attention to time. So, okay, I think I'm doing good. Okay, tip number 14, we're almost there. Keep track and follow up, okay? So when you are pitching, you're essentially doing sales in some way or another because you're trying to convince somebody to do something or believe something. So you wanna keep track of who you are pitching to. It could be as simple as an Excel doc on your laptop, or maybe a Google spreadsheet that you keep online. Keep track of who you've emailed, who you've pitched to in person, who you've talked to on the phone, and any notes that you can use in your follow-up. This is just kind of sales 101 to keep track of what you're doing. As far as follow-up goes, I like it when people ask permission to follow up, like after our first conversation, if they say, oh, do you mind if I follow up in a couple weeks? And I'll be like, oh, sure, yeah, go ahead. Or, oh, do you mind if I follow up with a bit more information? Sure, go for it. So be personalized with your follow-up. Don't be, too overly aggressive in your follow-up. Keep it short, keep it simple, keep it gracious. And I would say if you follow up in a couple weeks, you don't hear from somebody, wait a couple more weeks. If you get a couple of unreturned follow-up emails or something, maybe just leave them alone for a little bit. Kind of try to read the room, engage the interest. All right, last one, tip 15, greet, thank, and just be polite to people. This goes a long way. It's these manners that we just try to teach our kids from the time they are young. Instead of saying, Mom, give me cereal, I like to hear, Mom, would you mind getting me some cereal, please? Right? It makes a big difference on how they deliver that. That's basically a pitch, right, that they're giving me. So just a little bit of manners, a little bit of politeness, I think goes a long way. In the DECA competitions, I find that a lot of students, they walk in front of the judges and then they just go straight into their pitch. And they forget to even say hello or introduce themselves by name or shake hands. I know shaking hands, probably we're not doing that right now, but have a greeting. Again, it's about being human, greeting people, thanking them for their time at the end, and just having some kind of decent manners throughout your pitch. One thing that I always encourage, if somebody does give you their time and allows you to pitch something, send them a thank you afterwards. You know, not just in the moment, thank them for their time, but send them a thank you afterwards. You know, if you think about it, a job interview is a pitch, right? It's a pitch for you to be hired for that job. So to me, it always makes a big impact if I interview somebody and then they follow up with me later with, you know, a thank you email, you know, maybe recapping something that we talked about and saying that they're looking forward to discussing more in the future. I just think it's a really nice touch. Now, if you really want to make a more memorable impact, I recommend a handwritten note, because in today's digital world, you know, we get a lot of emails, and, you know, if I get a thank you email, I'm like, okay, that was nice, but then I just kind of file it away or delete it or something. But if I get a thank you note that is handwritten, that is, you know, delivered through the mail, I have a spot on my desk where I put it. Like, I've got a little collection of thank you notes, because it's just a nice touch. It's nice to have like a physical, tangible representation of that thank you. So I think it is a little bit more memorable in today's world to have something tangible. Okay, so those are my 15 tips, but I want to do a bit of a lightning round and address kind of the nuances of different types of pitches. So this will be kind of our bonus round. Okay, a couple more things. So pretty much everything that I've been talking about has been geared more towards the in-person pitch. So I want to address a few different types of things to consider in pitches that are not necessarily in person. Okay, let's talk about the email pitch. Okay, this is a little bit different. I love email pitches that are very personalized and very brief and to the point. I don't need to hear a whole business presentation in an email. I don't want to hear that. And I don't want to get anything generic. If it looks like you sent the same email to like 1,000 other people, I'm really not interested in it. If you can, get a referral. If you want to pitch something to somebody via email, check them out on LinkedIn first. See if you have any mutual connections. If you have a mutual connection to them, reach out to that person first and say, hey, I'm really wanting to pitch this service to this person. I see that you're connected to them. Do you mind if I use your name? You know, do you mind if I bring you up as a mutual contact, or would you mind making an introduction for us? That way it warms it up a little bit. It's not just a cold email from a stranger on the internet. You know, it could be something where it's like, hi, so-and-so, you know, I see that we have, you know, this person in common. I used to work with them back at whatever it was. And they said that you're great. And I wanted to reach out to you and tell you about this thing that I've got, right? So it's just like having a little bit more of a familiar connection to them to warm up your email. I would rather you take more time to write like 5 personalized emails than to blast 1,000 generic emails to people. I think you're going to get better results with quality over quantity. So keep the quantity shorter, make them really personal. Show that you know who the person is that you're emailing, and you have a reason for talking or emailing to them specifically, that they're not just a random email address that's getting this along with a bunch of other people. Also keep in mind, how can you be of service to them, right? It's just like we talked about at the very beginning. How are you solving a problem for somebody? How are you addressing a need? My mom has been in construction sales for 20 years, and she's still, every single phone call that she makes, she believes that she is helping somebody with the service that she's selling, because she's selling them leads that they can use to grow their business. So if you believe that, if you really believe that you're helping them and you're serving them and you're giving them something that they need, that's going to, you know, make your pitch that much better. Oh, I have a sample email that I want to show you guys. So this is a sample of a good email pitch. So it wasn't from the person that I ended up meeting with, but I ended up hiring the person that they were referring me to in this email. So I wanted to show you this. So this is from a mutual acquaintance. It's somebody that I met one time. It's not somebody I knew really well. But he reaches out to me. He says, hello, Jackie, Happy New Year. How are you? Oh, look at that, a nice greeting, a little politeness. It's been some time since I came with so-and-so to talk to your music business students, but it's still one of my most memorable experiences while I was in Florida. So he's kind of jogging my memory of how we met before, because I don't really know him very well. I'm writing because I just learned that a very close friend of mine, who's also a music professor, has relocated to Orlando, and I immediately thought of your program. So it's almost like he is trying to serve something. He's saying, hey, this is a person that's in Orlando now. I think you guys might be able to help each other out. She's an incredible singer, songwriter, director, entrepreneur, and taught extensively throughout different departments. Let me know if you're interested in seeing her info or resume. And if you like what you see, perhaps you guys can meet up. So it's very like non-pushy. It's not aggressive at all. It's super friendly. He didn't copy the person on the email. So he kind of gave me an out to say, no, I don't really have time right now, or I'm not interested. Or I could say, yeah, sure, why not? Send her my way, be happy to meet up with her. So I ended up hiring this person that he introduced me to. And this had much better of an effect than if she would have emailed me directly pitching herself for a job. Because I don't love getting those emails. I'm kind of like, I don't know you, and I don't know if I want to hire you, you know. This was just like, I thought this was a wonderful, like warm and kind of informal introduction to somebody who ended up bringing a lot of value to the table. Let's talk about the LinkedIn pitch briefly. First of all, I'm not a big fan of LinkedIn pitches. I love LinkedIn, but I like it for certain reasons. Don't spam people on LinkedIn. I get so much of this all the time. I'm amazed because I can't imagine that it's working for anybody. Use LinkedIn as a light way to get introduced to people. So for example, when I'm at a conference and I see a great panel, I like to connect with the panelists on LinkedIn. And when you send a connection request, it pops up, you know, do you want to add a note? I always say yes. And I say, loved your panel at the Music Biz conference, or whatever it was. So that way they know I'm not just a random person. I was at their panel and I really enjoyed it. Once they accept that connection request, if I wanted to pitch them something or ask for that conversation, once I'm connected to them, I can see their email address on LinkedIn. So don't pitch them directly on LinkedIn once you're connected to them. Take their email address from their profile, email them separately, and ask for that time to pitch something or whatever it may be. So I think LinkedIn is a good way to see connections, to kind of build a directory of people. But when you can, take it over to email. I think it's just a more professional way of doing things, and messages get lost in LinkedIn. It's a bit of a black hole. So I took an example of a LinkedIn pitch. This one is not a good pitch. Here's a real pitch that I got on LinkedIn. I won't read the whole thing, but it's good day, sir/madam. First of all, like, do you have any idea who you're pitching to? Like, you could probably look at a photo and personalize that a little bit more. But now I'm sir/madam. We are writing to you because we know we can gain your support morally or financially. We need your financial support of any amount you can donate. I'm going to keep going to the next part, and it says, you can donate or support us with $100 to $1 million to enable our team to reach our desired 100 million streaming target in 2 months' time. And it keeps going. I'm like, what are you talking about? Is this a thing where people just like donate $1 million to an artist to help with their streaming numbers? Like, this is not a real thing. They also included a SoundCloud link that did not link to anywhere. This is the generic SoundCloud link that goes to your own playlist. So if you click it and you have a SoundCloud account, it just takes you to your own profile. So this was not a good pitch. And unfortunately, this is more often what I see. This is a lot of what I get on LinkedIn. Please don't be one of those people that's just like blasting people with, you know, spammy pitches on LinkedIn. I know none of you would ever do that. Okay, let's talk about the virtual pitch. Okay, so same applies, but just a couple of extra things you need to worry about in a virtual pitch. You do need to be aware of, if you are on webcam, and I think you should be if you're doing a virtual pitch, have to be aware of your lighting, your angle, your camera angle, and your environment, okay? I am in my dining room right now, but I am using a virtual background that looks like I'm in a classroom. Just think it's a little bit more appropriate. And then if a kid runs by me in the background, you might not see it. I also have multiple lights on. I've got window blinds open. I've got a light on over here. So I'm trying to be as well lit as I can be. And I've got my camera angled in a way that I think is fairly professional. If you've been on a lot of Zoom calls lately, you may see a lot of up the nose shots from webcams. I found out that some people have webcams like at the bottom of their computer by their keyboard, and so it's automatically looking up at them. Not a great angle. So just kind of be aware of those couple of other things if you are doing a virtual pitch. Also, be familiar with your settings, okay? I know that we're all like in this virtual world now, so we're doing a lot of Zoom calls and webinars like this. I learned really quickly about my security settings when I was holding different Zoom sessions. So you don't want to be caught, you know, having some kind of issue that you have to deal with and you don't know how to fix it. if you can avoid that. So get real familiar with your security settings. I definitely have learned that in the last month or so. Okay, I want to address the phone pitch. So phone pitch is a little bit different. You typically would schedule that either by email first or maybe through an assistant. I would always try to schedule the phone call instead of just calling somebody directly, like even their office line. Try to schedule it first. It's going to be received better if it's expected and it's scheduled. I would say if you schedule a 5-minute phone call, you can get most people to agree to that. Be super friendly to the gatekeeper. So if you are coordinating with an assistant on the front end, treat them like gold, okay? This happens a lot more than you would think, where people are trying to, like, for example, kind of going back to job interviews, people are scheduling job interviews if I'm interested in meeting with them, but they're rude to my assistant. And I'm not gonna hire you if you're rude to my assistant. I think that shows a lot more about your character than how you act in front of me. So treat your gatekeepers really well. If you are really nice to them too, they're going to make your pipeline to the decision maker a lot easier. And the gatekeepers will eventually become the decision makers too. You don't know when, but I'm sure that they will at some point. Also, still smile even when you're on the phone. Even if they can't see your face, you can feel when somebody's smiling. You can still kind of feel somebody's energy when they're on the phone. So that's another kind of sales tactic that they say to do, is still smile when you're on the phone with somebody. All right. And then the last thing I wanted to address was the team pitch, which is a bit of a different beast. When you are not just doing an individual pitch, but you are in a team, there are a few other things to consider. I always tell my students, present a united front, be on the same page, right? Don't ever argue with each other or contradict each other or talk over each other when you're in that team setting. Know who's going to address each topic. So you each have your specialties that you focus on. So one person could be like the marketing specialist. One person could be the financial specialist. One person can be in charge of the intro and the hook and the conclusion, right? They could be like your bookend person. So assign those roles so that each person can be really comfortable in their particular role. And also when you open up the floor to questions, that helps you in knowing who's going to answer which question. So if it is a financial question, you know who the main point person is for that question. And you avoid the whole looking around at your teammates like, are you going to take that one? You take that? Not me, right? The other thing I recommend on team pitches, and this is good for individual pitches too, is to have an answer ready to go when you don't know the answer. So if they ask you a question and you're totally stumped and it's something you've never even considered before, take that as a good thing. Take that as something where wow, I never thought of that before. Thank you so much for bringing that up. That's not something we had considered, but we'll be happy to do some more research into that and get back to you with an answer later. Right? So you're still acknowledging it and you're appreciating the question, even if you don't know the answer, but you're still handling it professionally. Okay, so I want to wrap it up here and just say at the end of the day, you want to be a happy pitcher, right? If you are happy to be in the room and you're happy to be there and you feel like you're really offering something that people need and people can use and you're being of service to people, you're going to have a successful pitch. So you have to believe that and come in with that preparation, and they are going to reflect kind of that confidence that you're putting out there. So happy pitching to everybody. And I just love this little dog picture, so I want to throw it up one more time.